Family, I'm here. Sorry about that. I was having a little bit of technical difficulty, right off the bat, but I'm here. How's everyone's weekend going? I hope everyone is, having a safe and, good weekend out there. And I got a lot of stories I wanted to touch on. I like coming, through on the Saturdays, because I really was thinking about, like not going live, but I'm like, nah, I gotta come in and tap in with the family, you know what I mean? And stick to my normal, live stream uploading schedule, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm here, you know what I mean? And I hope everyone is having a good weekend and we ain't gonna waste no time. We're gonna get right into it. And, shout out to the chat, everybody in the chat that's rocking with me and tapping in with me. So first off, family, I want to get into that Jake Paul. Jake Paul caught a beatdown from a brother. You know what I mean? Because a lot of Jake Paul's fights, they look staged in all actuality to me. But this shows that how the system of racism, white supremacy works. Because white supremacy is a welfare system. That'll take like a talentless bum like Jake Paul and elevate him just based off of whiteness. Give them something to root for and cheer in, you know what I mean? Like a white hope, you know what I mean? But the brother, knocked down that white hope, that they had in Jake Paul, when he proved that the system of racism, white supremacy just gives unearned benefits, you know what I mean? Because Jake Paul got his jaw broken, and that fight with Tyson, all Jake Paul really fights is people that's, past their prime or, people where as though he can get them to conform to, how he wants the match to go down. He don't fight no real, solid brothers, that's really into boxing because Jake Paul is not more than a content creator, you know what I mean? Who used boxing to try to, propel him forward, you know what I mean? And he got elevated without putting in any work, so this shows, just how talentless Jake Paul was. You know what I mean? He got, a beat down, jaw broken, and that Tyson fight was staged too. You know what I mean? Because even though brother Tyson is older, to put them hands on him, you know what I mean? In all actuality, if it wasn't staged, you know what I mean? So yeah, this just shows how they take bums and elevate them. You know what I mean? To unearned benefits and things like that. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. You know what I mean? Um, we're moving right along. I seen something, family. AI, Allen Iverson, AI, he got some apartments, affordable apartments coming in Virginia. You know what I mean? And I think it's a good thing because it'll possibly benefit FBA families, create jobs in that area, which will go to FBA brothers and sisters, and a whole host of other things. Not to mention the construction company that would be in charge of it. Hopefully the contract goes to a FBA construction team. So I see it, bringing jobs to the area, stimulating the local economy in Allen Iverson's native Virginia. So I see it as being a good thing. But of course, you got the white supremacists, coming through saying that it's going to create crime, this, that, and the other. See, white supremacists love to attach like affordable housing and, just a bunch of nonsense and, try to dump that stigma on the black people. That's a white supremacist, fantasy that all black people are just out here committing crimes because what they're trying to, say. Because I seen something to where though a Karen, she was speaking, when they was bringing it through to the, I guess the local, community government in that area of Virginia, and she was saying, it'll bring crime, this, that, and the other, and she's trying to equate, affordable housing, with bringing crime to the area, trying to dump that negative stigma on black folks, like all black folks are just running around robbing, committing crime, and that's a bunch of nonsense. And you also have some off code, black people speaking out against this particular apartment that Brother Allen Iverson is trying to bring. You know what I mean? He got a partner now, but I believe his partner is FBA too, an FBA brother. So I think that it'll be a good thing, it'll bring uh, apartments affordable, for FBA families, to create jobs for FBA brothers and sisters. And I see it just being a good thing. So, I got the audio and the video of this, and we're going to walk through and talk about Allen Iverson bringing affordable apartments to his native Virginia family.
New apartments are coming to the peninsula tonight. Newport News City Council approved a zoning change for a proposed apartment complex, Iverson Landing. It is backed by local basketball legend Allen Iverson and is one step closer to reality. But Markeisha Jackson tells us questions about the project remain.
The lead developer for the project tells us that this will bring 120 new units to the area. This comes at a time when Newport News Mayor Philip Jones says he
120 new units, that equals jobs, stimulating the economy in that area, helping FBA families. So this ain't a bad thing, despite what some white supremacists and off code individuals want to say.
wants to keep new housing opportunities a priority for the city.
Never meant the world to us. We are excited to bring a nice development to Newport News.
There will soon be new apartments coming to Old Fort Eustis Boulevard.
Me and my partner, Alan, we've talked about giving back to the community and doing something nice for years now. So finally seeing it come to fruition was big.
Alvin Keels' partner on this project is retired NBA player and Newport News native Allen Iverson. Iverson was not in attendance at tonight's meeting where the project, Iverson Landing, got the go-ahead from City Council to move forward.
And we've learned a lot throughout the process, and hopefully the community has too.
In a process it's been indeed. In February, City Council actually voted the project down, saying more information was needed on how this would work property and traffic-wise for the busy intersection in nearby Wood Creek neighborhood. Questions that some citizens still had tonight.
Approval creates long-term maintenance costs and the residents risk that the city will inherit.
So what do you think is going to happen when you're trying to exit your apartment that you're paying for and you're waiting for the 10th or 15th time in traffic for someone to turn left?
Like I said, family, I think this would be a good thing. It creates jobs, new opportunities in that area, stimulates the economy, despite, what some naysayers are trying to say, you know what I mean? Because, affordable housing can benefit FBA families, not to mention they're going to want to put more jobs in there, you know what I mean, for all of the new residents of that community. So I think it'd be a good thing.
You're probably going to behave in a way that could be a little bit dangerous.
But developers say the past 9 months have been full of community engagement sessions to address those concerns.
Yeah, I heard in the meeting a lot of high density talk, but we're actually rezoning this to medium density.
They asked the community for patience and they promised transparency.
It's going to be a nice community. We're going to have all of the nice amenities, luxury amenities, and we're going to, definitely do something that's going to be a staple in this community.
The groundbreaking for the project isn't expected to happen for another 18 to 24 months. In Newport News.
So shout out to our brother Allen Iverson on his new endeavor. You know what I mean? Because like I said, I feel this go to benefit FBA families, create new jobs, and the construct this thing. Hopefully that job will even go to a FBA construction company. Who knows? But I think it'd be a good thing. Despite what the naysayers and the haters are trying to say. But moving right along. Family, since we've delineated, we're causing, we're causing people to scramble. They lost their cover because they used to, in the days of old, us foundational Black Americans getting out there advocating for them, speaking up for them, when injustices happen to people, but now with this whole delineation movement, they ain't got us as cover no more, So, people are scattering like roaches, they got to stand on their own 2 feet and hold their own nuts, you know what I mean? But, up there in, I believe it was Colorado, the Ethiopians are even scrambling, you know what I mean? Talking about how Ethiopia is so bad over there, this, that, and the other, but it was bad, over here in America. To us, our foundational Black American ancestors, worked to knock down, injustice and oppression and made the lane for everyone to flee to. So, yeah, I don't want to hear that. Folks got to stand on their own 2 feet and hold their own nuts. And, the news media outlets now, they starting to delineate people, since we've delineated on the Black grassroots. The news media outlets are starting to, say where these people are from that commit these janky crimes, and are scamming this, that, and the other, when it's forcing people to delineate, because usually when people commit these little janky crimes and do a bunch of nonsense, we as foundational Black Americans to catch the blowback on that. They are just attributed to, Black American society, but now they can't do that because we forcing, people to hold their own nuts. We saying, nah, that ain't our people, running them scams and finesses. Look at their disposition. Look at that hairline. That ain't a foundational Black American. You know what I mean? So it's really shaking things up, and it's forcing, everyone to go back to the drawing board and the drawing table, because we're just shaking things up right now, and people who are, trying to target the delineation movement and say it got a head, but the delineation movement, ain't got no head, just like us representing our foundational Black American lineage ain't got no head. They trying to draw up a fake head, as somebody to target. And, far too often they try to do this to Brother Tariq Nasheed, but, we render that useless because us representing our foundational Black American lineage, that's everyday FBA brothers and sisters on the Black grassroots, just, speaking up and advocating for our lineage. So you can't target nobody, so they having a hell of a time to try to, get this thing under wraps, but they can't do that because the wheels of the locomotion, the wheels of the locomotive are already in motion. Ain't no stopping or, derailing this train, it's full speed ahead. So I got the audio and the video of, these Ethiopians, crying about deportations and their protected status, being removed. And we're going to walk through and talk about this thing how we normally do. But we shaking things up, with the delineation movement, family. Fair use.
Aurora's Ethiopian community is being rocked by an announcement from the Department of Homeland Security. It is terminating the temporary protected status designation for Ethiopia. That means any Ethiopians under that status have 60 days to leave the United States or they could be deported. Your reporter in Aurora, Michael Labeda, went to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
And now that they're doing all these mass deportations, family, something I want to add in there too, we seeing a bunch of jobs open up, and them jobs, are, could be going to foundational Black American brothers and sisters, while we didn't get no tangibles, sitting the thing out, on the couch, we didn't get what we really wanted, which was our reparations and that Black hate crimes bill. We got a good consolation prize in this mass deportation thing, because now they're clearing the way, for us to get lineage-based policies and, brothers and sisters to get jobs, which were going to the immigrants, coming here. They was getting all the resources and aid, even from the government that should have been going to foundational Black American brothers and sisters. But let's continue.
Enforcement headquarters in Centennial to learn how many people could be affected.
Estimates are that there are more than 30,000 Ethiopians in Colorado, many of them citizens or residents, but some will now need to leave their lives in Colorado behind, they say, with little notice.
It just doesn't make sense.
Lydia Tamarit says there is a very large Ethiopian community in Colorado, especially in Aurora.
We're business owners. We're part of the community.
She says a lot of those people came over seeking safety from war.
It was very hard. There was famine, there was killing.
They were given temporary protected status by the United States government.
Yeah, they ain't saying nothing, because things like that were going on over here in America, us foundational Black Americans were enslaved, we fought injustice and oppression, and we had to make a way, it would have never been better. The white supremacists, for sure as hell, wasn't trying to, let our people out of slavery and bondage. We had to stand on, truth to power and fight it with resistance, you know what I mean? So, yeah, they could cry me a river on that, saying that, Ethiopia is just so bad. You got to get it together. You got to come on code and, handle your candle, like the same way we as FBAs had to do over here in America.
So they could
without the help of anyone or anybody.
Settle in the United States and work. But those days have come to an end. Friday, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem announced her decision to terminate the temporary protected status designation of Ethiopia. A U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services spokesperson saying, quote, temporary protected status designations are time limited and were never meant to be a ticket to permanent residency, unquote.
See, these tethers are really in a pickle right now because usually, under normal circumstances, when we didn't have this delineation movement going on, foundational Black American brothers and sisters would have been, lending our voices for advocacy to them, fighting, fighting off the white supremacists that are targeting these individuals, but now we ain't doing that. We leaving everyone to hold their own candle because these folks come over here, get in political office, undermine us, say we don't need no reparations, and they work in, opposition to the positive strides we trying to bring in the FBA society, you know what I mean? And then they, felt entitled, to a certain degree that we were supposed to, advocate for them. But we showing them now, we leaving them out there without no cover. And, this is why everybody crying, frustrated, mad and disgruntled.
Quote, Tamarit says the Ethiopian community is in a state of panic and disagrees that Ethiopia is a safe place to return to.
For people that have been here since 2022, they've established a life. They're just sending their children to school. A lot of them do have employment authorization cards, so they have started work. There's still a lot of ethnic war happening. It's really hard for those that are living there to find jobs, to feed their family. There's still parts of Ethiopia that's facing famine.
DHS is giving Ethiopians under TPS until February to self-deport. They add that if they use the U.S. Customs and Border Protection mobile app to report their departure, they will get a complimentary plane ticket and a $1,000 exit bonus. But Tamarit says 2 months just isn't enough.
Do they have a hope to go back to? Do they have a place to go back to that they could consider?
They got to make it better. Everybody can't just keep fleeing up over here to America. You know what I mean? And if everybody flees, the system of racism, white supremacy never gets knocked down. You know what I mean? Somebody got to stand on something the way we as FBAs, stood on truth to power and, fought the system of racism, white supremacy with, resistance. You know what I mean? If we would have never fought, our ancestors, would have never fought slavery and injustice, Jim Crow and things like that. You could bet your last damn dollar that it'd still be going on. So, these people could cry me a river. They got to stand on some business.
That are safe.
A U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services spokesperson said, quote, conditions in Ethiopia no longer pose a serious threat to the personal safety of returning Ethiopian nationals. Now, the U.S. Department of State does have a level 3 travel advisory out for Ethiopia, saying on their website, quote, reconsider travel to Ethiopia due to sporadic violent conflict, civil unrest, crime communications disruptions, terrorism, and kidnapping in border areas. In Centennial, Michael Aveta, covering Colorado First.
Yeah, these folks is really getting a wake up call, and we forced the hand of like the corporate sector and these news media outlets to delineate, because we've delineated, we set the tone for what goes on the Black FBA grassroots. We delineated, so they gotta delineate these people now, because under normal circumstances they would have been trying to throw they filth and they trash on the FBA society, and we ain't letting them do that no more. You know what I mean? We making people hold their own nuts and be accountable for their own tethers at this point in time. You know what I mean? Now everybody wants to run around, crying and complaining, and when they got to handle their own handle, you know what I mean? Because immigration don't benefit us as foundational Black Americans. In fact, the immigration, has drained, Black communities of resources and aid that should have been going to foundational Black American brothers and sisters. Brought crime, weird crimes into the community, this, that, and the other, you know what I mean? So it don't benefit us, you know what I mean? And in fact, getting all of this mass immigration out, now from what I'm seeing, it's opening up jobs, in the communities and neighborhoods that can go to foundational Black American brothers and sisters. So it's a good thing, I like what's going on, and I love the new Black Renaissance we got going on now, the delineation movement and things like that, because it makes folks accountable and they forced to look at that man in the mirror and hold their own nuts, so that's always a good thing, so moving right along, family. What I want to touch on is, I want to handle this FBA business. We got a good bit of scam Africans down there in B-more, who constantly keep FBA, coming out of the mouth, speaking down and coming out our lineage sideways, and we ain't gonna have that, you know what I mean? And a common theme, I'm hearing from these scam Africans, that we all need to come together, this, that, and the other. No, the hell we don't all need to come together. What's the sense of coming together with tethers that couldn't get it together in their homeland? So they fled over here. They don't come together in their homeland. So why would we as foundational Black Americans want to come together with these damn tethers? They'll undermine any positive strides we trying to bring into FBA society. You know what I mean? FBAs, we all we got and we all we need. You know what I mean? When we was going through, injustice and oppression and fighting in this land, our homeland, America, nobody came to rescue us. We had to stand on our own 2 feet, and fight it with resistance. We got resistance embedded in the spirit of us foundational Black Americans. And we don't all need to come together. So them damn scam Africans need to stop putting out that false narrative. If you want to be a scam African, a Pan-African, whatever, go ahead and be it, but it don't need us for real foundational Black American brothers and sisters to get on board with it. You know what I mean? We worried about FBA society. We standing on lineage business because, these damn tethers come over here and, sabotage and undermine us, and it ain't no sense of, coming together and getting on code with people that couldn't do it in their homeland. because they only gonna stop FBA progress. So I got the audio and the video of these scam Africans and be more, coming at FBA lineage wrong and sideways, and we're gonna walk through and talk about this thing, family. Let me pull it up. Thanks for everybody rocking with me. And peace to the chat. The family WED app 5248 says B1 FBA. FBA B1 salute, family. And thanks for rocking with me and tapping in with me, everybody. You know what I mean? And I hope everyone is having a good weekend and, staying safe. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe, family. Because a lot of times my videos get suppressed because I'm standing on this lineage business and speaking this FBA truth. And when you on that kind of time, the algorithm, works to suppress and, stagnate your content. I'm trying to get it. It's a long video, so we just are going to be jumping through to the most important parts of the video that stuck out to me the most, family, because it's a 2-hour video, and I don't want to be on here that long, breaking it down. So we're going to start from the parts I thought that was
community that control the things that we eat.
Fair use, fair use. You bring it back. We'll start about right here. Fair use.
Brevity and depth. Share with impact, but leave room for others. We don't expect that y'all need those questions. I mean, that type of rule, but nonetheless. Community first. This is not about ego, but proving who has the most. We don't have. Y'all got that. I already know who I have on this panel. But anyway, we want this to be a dialectical process. All right. So, opening guiding question. In this moment, when Pan-Africanism is being twisted, attacked, and even declared dead by some, how do you define?
Pan-Africanism is dead. What it was us foundational Black Americans thinking that we had some global Black unity with folks, and folks come over here and tell us, we don't need reparations, this, that, and the third, we lazy, ikadas, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, regurgitating white supremacist talking points, and damn that, folks over there, on the continent don't even, practice Pan-Africanism. They got a gazillion tribes, and Pan-Africanism is a way to erase our FBA lineage, and we can't have that. You know what I mean? Other folks got their lineages, and are about their people first and foremost, and damn anyone that's trying to say otherwise, that us FBA shouldn't be representing our lineage and trying to erase our lineage and turn us into generic Africans. We ain't that. We got a unique lineage as foundational Black Americans that was forged over here on American soil through resistance, fighting, injustice, and oppression, and folks don't got that. Folks, when the going gets tough, they flee, and we can't get on code and come together with people like that because they undermine us all day, every day.
What it truly means to be Pan-Africanist today. Let me say that again. Pan-Africanist today. And what personal or organizational lineage connects you to this work in a way that proves its ongoing relevance. So you all have mics, and y'all can go ahead and jump in.
And family, the one dude on this stage, this Pan-African ops, who's also a Democratic shield, I seen him talking to that unconscious flea cat, saying that reparations don't got to be cash for foundational Black Americans. It could be this, that, and the other. And if we want reparations just based off of Blackness, that's the wrong way to go about it. And this cat is just a scam African Democratic shield, trying to muddy the waters, because we've already established that reparations can't be, to everybody Black, because you got people that are Black in America that aren't responsible, don't come from the lineage of people who built America and were never compensated, so it can't be that. We've already established that, reparations must be lineage-based, allocated to foundational Black American freedmen. These scam Africans just try to muddy the waters when it comes to reparations. Reparations claiming to be anything other than a check ain't reparations at all, because we could do whatever we need. We could do the building. Once we get the check cut to us, we can build, create industries, institutions that benefit FBA brothers and sisters. That's self-explanatory, but it got to be cash. Anything other than cash, saying that it's reparations, it ain't reparations. Reparation involves, paying out a debt. They got to, divvy up them funds. Anything else is, uncivilized. We can do whatever we need to do once we get the check cut to us. So that's why we keep our foot on the gas pedal and demand that they cut the check.
You all have 5 minutes.
Sisters first. You want me to go first?
And that Dr. Mayat was at the rally, the second rally for reparations, but her energy was off. I felt, something off about her, truth be told, at the rally for reparations.
That's an excellent question. Peace and blessings again. My name is Brother Everett. I am president of the division of Marcus Garvey's UNIA ACL. I'm also Minister of Information for the entire UNIA globally. One of the things that Marcus Garvey said, because he traveled at a...
And Marcus Garvey's a non-factor, you know what I mean? He couldn't get it popping in Jamaica. They rejected him. He had to come over here amongst the black FBA grassroots to get it popping. So we lift him up, you know what I mean? Because if he could have, if he was this, that, and the other and so great, why didn't he accomplish anything in Jamaica? He had to come over here, and get it popping with real FBA brothers and sisters.
The early age is that he found out that wherever he went, black people were in the same condition. We were on the bottom. He saw that white people fought each other, Chinese fought each other, but when it came to us, they would unite to keep us down. And he noticed that we didn't know the power that was within us. And so to me, what Pan-African means is, it's not me being black.
We know the power that was in us. We had FBA riders, over here standing on, FBA business before Marcus Garvey ever came into the equation, And why did Marcus Garvey get a damn thing popping in Jamaica? That's because he couldn't. He needed to get around real FBA riders to do so.
Back here, it's me being black all over the world. We must come together.
No, that's a false narrative. We don't gotta all come together, around the world. Them folks ain't even coming together in their homeland. They running from systematic racism, white supremacy. So what the hell you think gonna happen when they come over here? You know what I mean? They're gonna sabotage and undermine any positive strides we trying to bring into FBA society. And we can't have that. We solely laser focus on, lineage first and foremost. You know what I mean? And that is what it is. Ain't no amount of crying, complaining, whining gonna stop that. This locomotive, standing on lineage business is already in motion, and we ain't gonna stop or slow down for anyone. So folks, it's just best to get out the way.
One of the main things that hurts us sometimes is that we have a condition of being tribal, a condition of being segregated, hating on each other. It starts from Bloods, Crips, that goes to Democrat, Republican. But in the UNIA, we always say one God, one aim, one destiny.
And if Pan-Africanism, could have done this, that, and the third, and helped out foundational Black Americans, why ain't it done it in, over 100 years? That's because it's a non-factor. We were the only ones trying to practice some global unity, and folks would come over here and undermine us. You know what I mean? After we look out for them, based off of blackness, we thought we had an ally. Even I could use this for an example, in Barack Obama, who's I believe, Nigerian. He got African, lineage, and we thought we had an ally in him. And he was doing things for the continent of Africa before us foundational Black Americans. You had FBA brothers and sisters getting cut down in the streets, unjustly by white supremacist race soldiers. And he turned a blind eye to that and passed, rainbow gang rights and gave the police more protections while turning a blind eye to us. And damn that, you know what I mean? Because we the only ones that thought we had some, global Black unity based off of blackness. You know what I mean? That's why, a lot of foundational Black Americans supported, Barack Obama. Truth be told, I supported him. I thought he would have been an ally. You know what I mean? And it turns out he wasn't nothing more than a tether. But let's continue.
So for me, the main important thing to be a Pan-African is to love Black people all over the world. We always take care of our family in the UNIA. We say my race is.
And we foundational Black Americans, we don't say not to love anybody and, have unity. But the thing is, we're focused on us first. You know what I mean? We got to get our own house in order before we can even think about, helping anyone else. And, why help a people that, don't give a damn about us? You know what I mean? Folks got to hold their own nuts. You know what I mean? We ain't going to be the only ones, getting the short end of the stick, putting all the effort forward, and, cats turn around and tell us we don't deserve reparations, this, that, and the other, and working to undermine us. What kind of, nonsense is that? It don't even make sense.
It's my family. I get beat up by my wife a lot about that. When I say my race, she understands now that my immediate family is my responsibility, but my cousins are still my responsibility, and you are still my responsibility. And so I believe the main thing that we have to start teaching is that, yes, I understand there's a lot of people saying I'm foundational Black America. I guess I am. I'm African American. I'm here. But what the white man calls all of us, the N-word. He doesn't hold any.
That's a pointless argument that the white supremacists, all call us the N-word, so we should all be practicing, some global Pan-Africanism. You know what I mean? Because if we gave a damn what the white supremacists thought, us foundational Black Americans, we would have never fought being enslaved, and met that with, head-on resistance, so we give a damn about what the white supremacists feel and think, because if we were under that mindset and ideology, we wouldn't have never knocked down drinking out of separate water fountains, having to ride on the back of the bus, this, that, and the other, and we would have never got out of slavery, truth be told, because the system of racism, white supremacy, for sure as hell wasn't trying to knock down no slavery. They was happy with it. They had free labor going on. So we don't give a damn, a care in the world what the white supremacists feel and think.
Any punches. To him, we're the N-word. And to him, we're always the same. It doesn't care if you're in Egypt. It doesn't care if, Kemet, it doesn't care if you're in London. It doesn't care if you're in Jamaica. It doesn't care if you're in Ghana. It doesn't care if you're in Baltimore City. So for me, the main aspect of coming together and being a Pan-African is you have to love Black people as a race. We can't be.
So they keep on saying that we need to come together, and that's a false narrative. Ain't no sense of coming together with a whole bunch of people that ain't even holding up they weight and end of the bargain. You know what I mean? You're going to get sabotaged, and you're going to have to work 10 times harder to compensate for that dead weight. You know what I mean? That's like you carrying around somebody on your back, carrying their load. After a while, your legs is going to get tired. You know what I mean? Because you got to carry your weight and their weight at the same time. But let's continue. I'm going to move right along, family, to this so-called Dr. Mayat.
An African. I'm an African American. And I'm not saying this. Look, I am.
Hold on, let me bring it back a little bit.
Is understanding
land, farms, and
is understanding that we
Well, I'm gonna just let it ride from there.
Land, farms, and we have to understand that we must come together, support each other, and that to me is the main heart of Pan-Africanism. Thank you.
Nobody comes together with us. Them, Tether sticking their own little groups and enclaves when they get over here. They only support their people first and foremost. And, that's the same way we as foundational Black Americans got to be, supporting FBA brothers and sisters who got business, sticking with our own people first and foremost. Because the number one rule of nature is, self-preservation. You know what I mean? We can't be supporting other people when they don't give a damn about us. That's ludicrous.
Ashe. To me, Dr. Asar.
Yeah, family, WED, app 5248. Yeah, delineation is key. Salute to you, family. Yup, because delineation is a beautiful thing. Folks ain't able to dump their trash on us. We specify, all of our achievements and success that we made as foundational Black Americans over here on American soil. We don't got to share our wins with nobody. Because 9 times out of 10, when, folks get an award, they quick to get up there and say where they from, advocate for their people, you know what I mean? And we ain't sharing letting people share in our victories and success, because we got, everything that's mainly positive in America is that way because us foundational Black Americans kicked the door down.
Testing. All right, there we go. Being a Pan-Africanist is understanding that we are Africans first. Above all things, we are Africans first. It seems like in 2025, well, they kind of beefed it up because it's always been there, that there is a concerted effort to make us forget that we are African people. Our ancestors were clear. If you go back and you study the history.
And they always try to say the ancestors this, the ancestors that. The ancestors did what they thought they had to do at the time. They thought they had some kind of resistance to white supremacy and Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism ain't no resistance. They rather you just be generic Africans, because you ain't got no claim to reparations, and it makes you feel like an outsider in your own homeland. We built the damn America. We ain't no guest, and we ain't, equal to no damn foreign tethers.
Of us in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, post-emancipation, post-1863, 1865, we were naming communities after Africa. Yeah,
but like I meant to say, family, like the ancestors thought they had some kind of, resistance, not to say what they did was wrong, because they did what they thought they had to do at the time, but it's on us, the new generation, to get foundational Black Americans, moving forward. And, since we picked up the lineage, we made all kind of positive strides. We got delineation talks in the public lexicon, on paperwork out there in California. We getting reparations, meetings shaking, and advocating for our group, and sooner or later we're going to get reparations. That damn Pan-Africanism thing, a lot of them believe that reparations should go to global Black, and that's never going to work. You know what I mean? It must be lineage based, you know what I mean, to the people that descend from the people who built America, and that's us foundational Black American freedmen, you know what I mean? So the ancestors did what they thought was true, right, and exact, but it's on us to, make something happen in real world time, and that's exactly what we're doing.
I'm sorry, after Africa, churches, Africa, newspapers after Africa, right?
That's the old paradigm. Yesterday's price ain't today's price. It's a whole new paradigm out here. And folks better get with it. That old Pan-Africanism thing, is vague. It undermines, and it's a way of erasing our unique lineage as foundational Black Americans. So folks better get with it. It's a new paradigm. And, representing the lineage is the new wave.
And so now we're identifying with everything other than being African. I'm an African American. And I'm not saying this. Look, I am I know we say Black American or foundational Black American or African American. I'm proud of the lineage that we have here. Don't get it twisted. But I'm clear.
And another point, family, us saying we generic, vague Africans, that undermines, our people on this land, our ancestors on this land, American soil, who fought racism, injustice, and oppression. Africa, had nothing to do with us. In fact, some of the individuals, who got lineage that, not lineage, but, that got people that, came from Africa, in a bloodline, we ain't the same people no more. We had a ethnogenesis on American soil, and Africa, if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, they were complicit in selling our people out into bondage and slavery, so we can't unify with that, because that mindset still exists among them tethers, while, with a lot of foundational Black Americans that were already here, it fails to address that, Pan-Africanism, and just says we all vague, generic, Africans. There was already, Black people on this land, the Black Aboriginals, and that's the part that that Pan-Africanism thing don't tell, and that's done by design, as a way to try to minimize, the truth about that aspect, you know what I mean?
That I'm sitting here before you as an African woman first. Sure. I'm clear that my ancestors came from Africa. I'm clear. And I'm clear that...
And ethnogenesis happened too. The foundational Black Americans, that, got history that traces back there, you know what I mean? That's ethnogenesis occurred. Our family been on this land for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that tried to not tell the truth that an ethnogenesis happened. Any group of people, if they go to a new land, once they own there hundreds and hundreds of years, they have an ethnogenesis, so folks don't respect the ethnogenesis part of things.
That they were caught up in the Ma'afa. I'm clear on that. But you have people like Dan Calloway who's telling people.
And Dan Calloway is a goofy, you know what I mean? He said that slavery never existed, that, no Africans were taken from the continent and brought over here to America. That happened. That's just the realness of stuff. But we specified that an ethnogenesis happened. Us real foundational Black American brothers and sisters. Because there was Black Aboriginals already on this land. A lot of them. And we ain't some generic Africans. We a new ethnic group that was forged over here on American soil. But Dan Calloway says slavery didn't exist. Harriet Tubman was a psyop. A whole bunch of, pseudo ideology he pumps out, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And truth be told, the rhetoric he's spewing, that undermines our claim for reparations. You know what I mean?
We always been in America. Our lineage started here. We've always been here. We're the Native Americans. No, we don't have nothing to do with Africa. And you got people, and and Brother Tariq Nasheed, I'm going to call his name.
We don't have nothing to do with Africa because we had an ethnogenesis. You know what I mean? There were some Africans brought over, but when they got here, they had an ethnogenesis, and there were a lot of Black Aboriginals already on this land, and we were all thrown together. We had an ethnogenesis, and we're now foundational Black Americans.
And this brother and I, we talk. I've been featured in his documentaries. We talk. But even with the foundational Black American movement, you got the push.
It's not a movement. It's a lineage.
To separate us from Africa. And that's where I draw the line. And he knows that. And you see, I'm seeing this. This is being live streamed. He knows that because I've had conversations with him about that. We are African people first. So to be a Pan-Africanist is to understand that we are African first. To understand that we all have a shared identity. We have a shared.
Hold on right there. We all don't have some shared identity. No, we don't, because them people, fled over here. We foundational Black Americans, ain't equal to no damn, foreign fleeing, tethers or immigrants. You know what I mean? We built America. We descend from the lineage of people who are responsible for building America, fighting resistance, injustice, on any scale. We come from that. We come from a rider class. We don't come from, people who sold their people into slavery, this, that, and the other, which is a bunch of nonsense.
History, and we have a shared struggle. Also, understanding the need to unify for the purpose of, what you say, Doc, eradicating oppression. That's what it means to be a pan.
Sister, how do you know that the Africans brought over survived? We had an ethnogenesis. That's inconsequential, That's the fact of the matter was some Africans were brought over, and there was a lot of Aboriginal people already here, Black Aboriginal, but it's inconsequential. It's a straw man argument because we had an ethnogenesis, where we don't got, we're not Africans now. We're a foundational Black Americans. You know what I mean? Once you spend so much time on a land mass, you're of that. You know what I mean? You're a different group of people. So that's inconsequential. It's a straw man argument. On either end. Because you got some folks that want to say, oh well, we're Indians. We don't have nothing to do with Africa. Slavery didn't exist. And you got folks trying to undermine it. To push for reparations and lineage-based justice, with them kind of claims, and even like saying Aboriginal because some people, we got some tethers now trying to claim that they're Aboriginal, that they was already, their people was here in America, this, that, and the other. This is why I'm just, I use to describe my lineage foundational Black Americans, you know what I mean? Because it can't be remixed, it can't be flipped, and a lot of people that's saying that they Indians, this, that, and the other, they ain't got no, they're not a card carrying member of any of them tribes, you know what I mean? And it's just, I just specify the lineage because one thing's for sure, two things for certain, I'm a foundational Black American. That much is known, you know what I mean? And, them tribes have been remixed and flipped, the white supremacists is in them tribes. You got a bunch of $5 Indians running around, truth be told.
And Africanness. And I'm gonna pass the mic to my sister.
So thank you for having me first and foremost. Thank you.
We're pleased to have you.
Everyone on here. Yes. So Dr. Mott said most of it. So what did she leave? I'm going to say what she left. Let's get a working definition. Unity for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation.
That's a common theme. They keep saying it's unity, unity, unity. We don't need unity with all these other groups of black people that ain't got no unity in their homeland. We're the most codified group of people as foundational black Americans there are on the planet. You know what I mean? We had to have cohesiveness and unity to knock down, slavery, Jim Crow, and all of the things that we were going on. We understood that, It's when the Tethers came up into our mix, they started to derail our momentum a little bit, bringing, weird things and, gender wars, throwing all of that kind of stuff into the mix,
Everywhere we are. And that basic bare bones concept and definition can go all the way back, can be found documented in the first Pan-African Conference, right? 1900. They had a simple goal and objective.
See, Pan-Africanism been around since the early 1900s, and when has it moved the needle for our people? You know what I mean? We ain't just going to keep, it was only a strategy. I heard Brother Afro Elite, use this, and I liked how he used it, you know what I mean? To say that Pan-Africanism, that was only a strategy to get us foundational black Americans to where we needed, to be at, to give us our leg up. And that strategy didn't work. And we shift to, plan B, which is lineage based. And plan B, which is representing the lineage, is moving the needle forward, identifying our group as foundational black Americans, all of our contributions and achievements that we, got shaken over here on American soil. Pan-Africanism hasn't moved the needle, and it is dead. You know what I mean? That's why you hear that a lot, being said that Pan-Africanism is dead, because it's dead. It was a one-sided coin that we, truth be told, we got to be real about it. We were the only ones practicing it.
And we need to have a simple goal and objective, right? So whenever we come together, and I teach this a lot to brothers and sisters on the continent, and I'll tell you a little bit about that because you asked about organizations, and I work for an organization called I Love Black People, aside from teaching for the City University of New York. But one of the things I stress to them is that us coming together at a house party or an event, or even something that elevates the African aesthetic, just coming out to that is not enough. Pan-Africanism is when we come together precisely for the purpose of dealing with our condition, all hands on deck. That's what it is. And it always produces something. You know why? Because if it doesn't, then it fails.
No, it don't. It don't produce not a damn thing. We move the needle as foundational black Americans, brothers and sisters, to get, lineage-based talks in the public lexicon, to get delineation terminology, on paperwork, this, that, and the other, because Pan-Africanism, majority of them think that, every black person needs reparation, and every black person, ain't entitled to reparations, for sure as hell not over here on American soil. It was only one group of people that, fought systematic racism, white supremacy, for the most part, in America, and that were the only group that built America, and that's us foundational black Americans, you know what I mean? So, that's Pan-Africanism is just, it's not applicable, you know what I mean? It doesn't move the needle forward, it's dead,
To be Pan-Africanist. Okay, so there are measurable gains. I hear a lot of that in the public realm. Oh, well, what are the benefits? We don't benefit from it. Other people always benefit. We're the Pan-Africanists. And speaking of African people in America, we've been the Pan-Africanists. No, that's true. We have. But it's a dialectical relationship. It's been reciprocated. I had to.
Yeah, that's horse crap, family. But I'm going to move right along because I don't want to stay on this too much. But here go the dude that was, in opposition to, cash reparations, you know what I mean? And I seen him, discussing reparations with Unconscious Fleet, talking about reparations don't got to be cash payments. It could be other things, you shouldn't just want to get it, based off of blackness, just trying to muddy the waters. We never said, we already got the the lingo clear as to who's qualified for reparations, and that's foundational Black Americans. You know what I mean? Because there's many Black people in America, but every Black person in America, don't descend from the people who are responsible for building America. But let's get into it, family. He's an op, though, a Democratic shield.
The notion of Pan-Africanism, my organization, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, our focus is on political advocacy, specifically on behalf of Black people. And there are very few independent Black political formations that exist in our society. When we think about what does Pan-Africanism mean in the context of our political struggle.
Peace to my family, Infinite Earth, B1, who says B1, great work, FBA all day. Salute, FBA salute, family.
We understand what politics is. Politics is warfare without the bloodshed. Warfare is politics that's spilled out of the back room. So we have to understand that politics is about contesting for power and resources for our community. I think too often politics is understood and taught to us in the American mainstream as we got to be incorporated right into the American institutions in order to engage and advance our interests in the political landscape. But we have to understand it in many ways as our enemies understand it, as a site for contestation of power. And so with that,
the one thing I don't respect about the Pan-Africanism thing, either is it tries to, get us to accept that we're guests on this homeland, that we're all on our homeland, which is America over here on American soil, when it tries to say that we're just some lost generic Africans. It's a way to erase our FBA lineage and all the contributions that we made positively over here in America. Everything that's positive about America, basically comes from foundational Black American brothers and sisters' hands, and we can't let that be erased. We won't let that be erased, because that's a slap in the face to us and our ancestors.
That means, in the context of Pan-Africanism, and we understand the station that we are collectively in as a people. It is, if we're to be an independent people, we have to have control over the life-preserving institutions that are necessary for us to have a good quality of life. Transportation, food distribution, waste disposal, technology, education.
And we can get all that done, amongst us in foundational Black American society. You got plenty of brothers and sisters, having businesses and this, that, and the other, doing good, and right by our people. We don't got to be some, vague, generic Pan-Africans, to do that. You know what I mean? So stop trying to, make straw man arguments and things like that.
Military. These are all fields of human endeavor that if we are to be a free people, we have to control those life-preserving institutions. The challenge that we face is that as a people, we are reliant on white folks and people outside of our community for those services that we need as a community to survive. So if we take our freedom seriously, then what is primary is advocating for us to get the resources and investment we need so that we can practice that freedom and self-determination. And I think
we are advocating on the Black FBA grassroots for, other foundational Black American brothers and sisters. We advocating for our lineage, but what we're not doing is, advocating, and being the voice box and the mouthpiece for, Black people globally, most of which, most of the times these tethers come over here and work in opposition to the positive strides we trying to bring in to FBA society, say we don't need no reparations and stuff like that. So folks got to hold their own candle, we ain't coming together, on some, Pan-Africanism kick, to where though we're just gonna negate our FBA lineage, you know what I mean? Delineation and things like that, that's already out there, and it ain't no drawing it back in or reeling it back in, you know what I mean? We standing on lineage business. We not going to be erased, and we're doing what every other group, in the world does, being about their lineage first and foremost.
One of the unfortunate things about the moment that we're in is that, unfortunately, I think for many people, the plantation is inevitable, I think, in the consciousness of our people. That there's a way that we proceed in the world.
And keep in mind, this is the same, foolish scam African that said, reparations don't need to be, cash, and that, if you just trying to muddy the water, saying that if you want to check just for being Black, that ain't going to work. We already, got the lingo clear as to what reparations is, who it's going to go to. So he's just trying to muddy the waters. Keep in mind, this is the same cat that I don't believe is even for foundational Black Americans getting cash reparations. Because a lot of, these scam Africans, they don't want to see, foundational Black Americans, get our justice claim, which is cash reparations. They want it to be chalked up in the air to, Africa, the Caribbean, everybody Black. Damn that, it'll never work. And they aren't responsible for building America.
In a way that assumes white domination is the norm, right? And unfortunately, not enough of our people think that we can beat white folks in this game of political warfare. So
we foundational Black Americans, we know we can beat, the system of racism, white supremacy. The problem is you got these foreign fleeing tethers that come over here and bow down and take a knee to systematic racism, white supremacy, fleeing all over the damn place. And we can't come on code and, align with people like that because they'll sabotage us. They got a mindset of fleeing, they're afraid, they're punks. And us foundational Black Americans, we got a spirit of resistance and fighting, embedded in us, So we can't come on code and come together in some, kumbaya kick with those kind of individuals.
So a part of it is we need to organize ourselves, understanding that we are engaged in political warfare. We are contesting for resources for our community, and we have to do so in a way that it facilitates our freedom and self-determination. What our enemies do is they have international networks, right? Those international networks are important for them in the local places that they are in. So take something as simple as like food distribution. We don't control the things that we eat.
Yeah, he's just doing a bunch of plebiscite babbling, which typically these scam Africans, try to do, and just throw out a bunch of, word salad, to try to confuse real FBA brothers and sisters and, get you out of, standing on lineage-based, business, you know what I mean? Being about the lineage first and foremost, and we can have, we can't have, no any type of, we can, but we can have unity with brothers and sisters from other places is what I'm meaning to try to say, but we can't, have unity to where as though, our lineage is erased and our lineage, is being compromised, under some, vague Pan-Africanism banner to where though we got to chalk all of our wins and, everything we do and positively in FBA society and give it back to, Africa. We can't have that. We can have unity, if folks, want it, but me, I'm about unity, but I'm about FBA first and foremost. Anything that, tries to undermine, I'm for unity, with anybody, regardless of color, if they align with me, and are, not in opposition to, FBAs, but anything that's in opposition to my people, I'm in opposition to that, because I'm lineage based first and foremost. I'm a rider for my people. You know what I mean? So we can't have no unity on the basis of, our unique lineage being wiped out. That ain't gonna work. You know what I mean? So they can miss me with that, but moving right along. I want to talk about this, Tether. I think his name is Frank Zanu. That Tether who said FBAs have no culture when he was talking to a fellow, one of his Haitian tethers, he came on, I believe, a platform that was Pan-Africanist, because they was talking at normal talking point we see coming from these scam Africans to where though they say that we all need to come together, this, that, and the third, and they was basically, trying to convince this, Tether Frank that, we got culture as FBAs, which we do. We are the global culture that everybody wants to steal from and cosplay as, but to me, we don't even need to talk to this Tether. He ain't nothing but a foreign fleeing Tether sitting up over here in America, who ain't got the guts and the balls to stand on business in his homeland. And ain't no convincing a Tether because a Tether is unreasonable. So I wouldn't even be trying to convince this Tether that we got culture, because we know we're the global culture. You know what I mean? And we paved the way for his narrow musty behind to even come over here to America. So we don't gotta, talk, and if you ask me, they didn't, they needed real FBA brothers and sisters on this platform to where though we could really debunk some of this horse crap, coming from them. They were on some, on this Karen Hunter show, I got more, I'm not familiar with her show, but I got more of Pan-Africanism vibes off of her. And, that just ain't the time that we as FBAs are on, you know what I mean? So let's get into it, family, fair use.
Okay,
like hip hop, not hip hop. I mean, I don't want to
Look,
yes, I feel like
you haven't thought about it. It's fine. Don't make things up.
I'm not making it up.
Okay,
I feel like
then educate me. You feel.
And family, I ain't gonna, let this whole video play. I'm gonna just, get to the parts that stuck out to me the most, because I don't want to be on here too long.
You should know.
Okay.
You were born and raised
All right.
here.
Bring it down, Smith. Bring it down.
But you talking to somebody that ain't even foundational Black American about Black American culture. You know what I mean? They assimilated into, what we've already done. You know what I mean? And they ain't of our lineage, so they can't, give a good talking point. This is a tether. You know what I mean? I wouldn't even be explaining myself to a tether. Because, the fact that he got to flee all over the place, that says to the mindset of his people.
Do you stand by that, Frank Zano?
Yeah.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight.
Was the Haitian conversation. So it was.
No, but you said African American. You brought Black people in. You didn't say Haitians.
No, I'm saying the conversation I had with Nancy was Haitians can fix Haiti. It was in that conversation that this came out, and it was a soundbite on TikTok. Now, when I went to the W.E.B. Du Bois Center in Ghana, I was a young fellow when.
What did I tell you, family? These damn scam Africans and these damn Tether, they always try to, focus on, the history of, Pan-Africanists, you know what I mean? Who, like I said, they did what they thought would move the needle forward at that time, so I don't knock them, but, stop focusing on that. We can't use, the old weapons to fight new wars. We got to change up and do things differently. So, speaking about W.E.B. Du Bois, this, that, or the other, or old people that used to practice Pan-Africanism, that's an old paradigm. We in a new paradigm and we get much things done, picking up the soil and representing our FBA lineage.
And first we went, and there was a sign on the wall, big one. I don't know, maybe a poet who wrote it, maybe Langston Hughes or something, I forgot, but they had it on the wall, and it said, the problem and the pain of slavery was not the work they make us do. It is the fact that it took away our language, our culture, our history, our traditions, and that leaves a man like a tree with no roots.
We got roots, we hear this, from the Tether that, we ain't got no roots, we ain't got no culture, and they ain't got real FBA brothers and sisters, that really stand on lineage business, never around to debunk this horse crap, we're the global culture as foundational Black Americans, these Africans, not to be disparaging, to them, but they ain't got no culture. They got traditions that they pull out, every once in a while in practice. We FBAs got a global culture, so much so that people want to steal and try to remix our culture and history and cosplay as us, you know what I mean? And a culture is something that changes, and stands the test of time that you do consistently. And we're the only group of people with that, you know what I mean? We're the only people with resistance embedded in the DNA that never let their foot up off of fighting systematic racism, white supremacy, not to mention all the music genres we create. You can have a dance in Pennsylvania that'll travel, down south to Louisiana, back to California, to Chicago, this, that, and the third, so we constantly reinvent ourselves as foundational Black Americans. Our culture is, always growing, you know what I mean? And we practice our culture on a daily basis, unlike these foreign fleeing tethers, that come over here from Africa that got some traditions that they pull out, every once in a while to practice, you know what I mean? This is why they try to cosplay and latch on to us, because, to get some validity.
And it hit me. I wrote it down in my notebook. Now, when you listen to a lot of the writings about slavery, the first thing you hear, even in the United States, is about how our life, our culture, our language and history was taken away from us. That is very common.
So
in
what?
songs, music.
Okay.
And we got, dope things we forged over here on American soil, like the Tutnese language, you know what I mean? And all types of dances, rhythm and blues, so much so that, we got folks in other countries, over there in Africa, right as we speak, cosplaying where we used to wear the old throwback jerseys in the early 2000s. They still in our old stuff. You know what I mean? To just try to have some kind of they try to leech onto our old stuff is basically what I'm trying to say. We got the global culture that influences everybody.
I met Alex Haley's.
Hold on. You're from Benin.
Yeah.
You're not there now. You're here. You're an American citizen. You came here. You left there.
And I don't take advice from foreign fleeing tethers. What the hell I'm going to learn from a tether? What, how to not stand on business and flee? No, you know what I mean? The fact that he's over here, we don't need to discuss anything with him. You know what I mean? Because a tether, ain't going to change their mindset. The system of racism, white supremacy has taken over these folks. They drop down and take a knee to it and bend over to systematic white supremacy. When we as FBAs, we meet white supremacy head on with resistance, look it dead in the eyes. You know what I mean? They don't do this. They don't stand on that kind of business.
To come here,
Mm-hmm.
right? The homie kingdom, we love the Black Panther.
What the hell kind of advice you going to get from a foreign fleeing tether? How to fail, how to run, put on your flip-flops when the going gets tough. I don't want that kind of advice, never.
And all of this and the Dora Milaje based on the homie warriors and Woman King, we love that. But the homie kingdom, one of the ways in which your origin, your country of origin, Benin, conquered, they would sell their people into bondage to the Europeans, into this transatlantic slave.
So this guy come from the lineage of sellouts and all actuality. What a damn advice you gonna get from a sellout? That's a tether on top of that.
Trade. When you lost, you got sold, and every year, you got 333,000 pounds sterling for black bodies to be sold into the transatlantic slave trade, which would be worth about $16.7 million annually every single year. It was Benin known as the Slave Coast because of the flourishing trade of human bodies. That was your protocol. That was the way in which you dominated. And it went on for more than a decade. In the 1780s to 90s, Benin sold more than 102,000 bodies into bondage. So epigenetically, one could argue, Frank Zanu, that part of your way of knowing is to sell out your people. One could argue that. Maybe that's in your epigenetic.
He is a damn sellout, foreign fleeing tether. You know what I mean? You can't get no advice from this guy. What advice you gonna get from a foreign fleeing tether? How to fail?
It's because, to me, to say something so boldly that black people have no culture, with no references, and you're talking to somebody that's not black, you're talking to somebody who clearly wasn't educated enough, you're throwing questions at her. Give us two things, two values. Well, I can give you 15. I'm going to give you more, but family and integrity. And we don't really do well with sellouts. That's another black cultural value. But I was looking.
Being on code, the music we create, family, resistance, it's just numerous things that us foundational black Americans, we got culture. We're the global culture. So much so that the proof is in the pudding. You got people in Africa right now, with wearing big jerseys, trying to, sag the pants, have the fitted hats, copying and emulating us foundational black Americans. You know what I mean? Everything we do, people want to gravitate to it, and, try to steal and remix our culture, for themselves. But I'm going to move off of this, family. I'm going to speed it up a little bit to where though they brought this dude who was a Pan-African on. I could tell, from the way his talking points he was delivering, but we're going to get into it. Fair use.
Do not know. I'm going to invite everybody who is not a historian. If you read some things, or you went down YouTube rabbit hole, you are not an expert. You have not lived your life studying this. And I'm going to invite you to stop talking about things you don't know. But in the meantime, I'm going to also...
You haven't said something I don't know. That's the point. What is it I don't know? I've lived
that black people don't have culture. You believe that black people don't have culture.
But I'm asking you to explain to me.
I'm going to ask.
you live here, but you have no idea about the FBA experience because you don't come from that bloodline of people, that built America, who made dances on this soil, who created all of the art forms, music genres, soul food, countless inventions over here on American soil. You come from a fleeing background, you know what I mean? When the going gets tough, you put on your flip flops. So just living in a place it's not the same as coming from a bloodline that traces back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years on this very land.
Rooted you from your original habitat, and they took everything away from you. What is wrong to say this?
And they over there now conquering, running roughshod over there on the African continent. I see videos left and right, not to sound disparaging, of Africans getting whipped down on, hit over top of the head with bamboo sticks by the Chinese, and white people living on the best part of that land and got the Africans living down there in little shanty rundown villages to where though they shitting in the street, you know what I mean? And that's a bunch of nonsense, you know what I mean? Because then people don't stand on no kind of business. For the most part, they got too much infighting, tribal beefs to where though they can't come together and get it together. We as FBAs are the most on cold black people on the planet. That's the only way we was able to do all of the things we did, on American soil. We had to have constant codification, and these people lack it.
These people's culture have been taken away from them. I don't understand.
Okay, well, I'm going to actually bring somebody in who knows more about this than I do, who studies Africa, who studies Black history, who teaches at Clark.
And they don't have culture. What they got is traditions that they pull out every once in a while and participate in. Culture is, everlasting, something that you do on a constant basis, consistent basis.
Atlanta. So we're going to bring in Dr. Daniel Black when we come back. Frank Zanu is here. He's made a statement before the break in quoting W.B. Du Bois, who's...
And Dr. Daniel Black, he had a bunch of weak talking points as well, because he ain't nothing but a scam Africanist as well. You know what I mean?
He has a whole sentence.
He gave him lightweight questions. He didn't really, put his ass up under the fire like a real FBA brother or sister would have, for the horse crap he was spewing.
In Ghana and Accra, there was a quote there that you quoted, and you went on a talk show, or you were on your own show, you invited somebody on and you said Black people have no culture. And I asked you, do you stand by that? And
he was talking to one of his fellow Tether saying, Black people had no culture, Black Americans have no culture. He wasn't talking to an FBA brother or sister. He was talking to somebody from Haiti.
Said yes, because of that quote. So I thought it would be great to have somebody who actually teaches this to come on and inform all of us why that is. I said you were wrong, but this is your view and your view can't be wrong, but why it's not helpful. Let's say it like that. It's not helpful. So let me welcome Professor of Africana Studies at Clark Atlanta in Atlanta, author of many books. Dr. Daniel Black is here. Hi. Uh-oh. Your internet. Look at God. Go ahead.
Wait a minute. Yes. Brother Frank, how are you, my brother?
Doing very well. Thank you.
Good. Very good. I first want to say that I am on here to enjoy a beautiful...
I wouldn't even have gave him that. No damn sellout Tether is my brother, not under any circumstances.
Full exchange. I am not at all on here to attack or to in any way incite rebellion. I certainly believe in.
He gave him a bunch of softball questions.
In communication, as Karen does. I certainly believe in truth, like all three of us do, and we all believe in integrity. And I think it could be helpful if I can just offer this possibility, right? I think what could really, 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 really help this dialogue is that there's a premise here that I think is problematic, but I don't think it's yours, Mr. Frank. I think it's what people have taught in the world. And most of us have taken it because it's just what historians have said. And that premise is this. When Africans were enslaved in Africa and scattered around the world, everything, all their culture, I think you were saying this a minute ago, was stripped from them. That's the error. That's the error in this whole thing.
See, he's kind of, this scam African, Dan Black is, kind of, chalking up everything to Africa, saying that we still retain some Africanists, you know what I mean? And it negates the fact that there was already black aboriginals already on this land, you know what I mean? And we had an ethnogenesis. Everything we have forged over here in America, the greatness and the things we've done, all of our ingenuity and continuity was forged over here on American soil, separate of Africa. You know what I mean? We ain't chalking up all of our victories to some damn, Africanness. You know what I mean? We ain't African, and we had an ethnogenesis. You know what I mean? So I don't like how this guy, was even framing his argument, to this dude.
Because a process cannot strip culture, the totality of culture, from a people. Culture sometimes is in the artifacts of what people have, but culture is also in the flesh. Anywhere a person goes, their culture goes with them. Pieces of that culture in the dance, it's in the body, in the language. We brought African languages to America because we spoke African languages in Africa. We were certainly denied speaking those languages after a while once we were enslaved.
We got our own language, Tutnese, that was forged over here on American soil through resistance. You know what I mean? I don't even like how this dude is framing the question, you know what I mean? To make, us look like we were robbed of this, that, and the third. And, he's framing it to where as though, we retain stuff. I don't like the whole, premise of his argument.
But those languages and the influences of those languages are still in our Black English tongues right now. Right? So the premise...
No, that's not in our tongue right now. Everything that's on a foundational Black American brother or sister's tongue was forged over here on American soil, through the lingo. This is why we have little, slang words. We could say now that, an African from the continent wouldn't even know what the hell that is. He couldn't relate, you know what I mean? Because we create things on the drop of a dime. Culture is something that constantly moves. It's like ever flowing water, and these damn, Africans, let's be real, they don't got that. What they got is traditions, and they might bring out some kente cloth, which, by the way, which they don't make, you know what I mean, that came from damn China or somewhere, or some European warehouse made it. These people ain't got no culture. They the cultureless people, you know what I mean? So much so that they, try to project their failure on us, and we don't have that, FBA, our delineation movement, forces people to be held accountable, you know what I mean, and look that man in the mirror,
Here is that African people who were enslaved and taken from Africa lost all of Africa in the process of being enslaved. That's the error. Right? Much of the culture came with us. Then through transmutation
and through, the couple the few Africans that were, brought over here, they lost all of that, so this dude is making, a bad faith argument to say that, we retain some, Africanness, they brothers and sisters that was brought over, they had an ethnogenesis, and they didn't retain none of that. Everything, that we did was forged over here on American soil, you know what I mean? We ain't some generic Africans. This is how you could tell that he's a scam African. You just got to listen closely to how people are framing their words, family, and the kind of, talking points that they're making in all actuality. This will tell you, at the end of the day, who you dealing with in all actuality.
Mutation and synthesis, we revised through some force and through some voluntary actions. We revised a lot of African culture in order that it could fit the context and the circumstances and the brutality under which we lived in this diaspora.
We even have hoodoo, which is a FBA spiritual practice, that was forged over here and made on American soil,
For place, right? Called the Americas. So there's much culture here that came along with us, and there's much culture that we revised and gave birth to once we got here. For example, you get jazz music in America, but jazz has its roots in Africa.
Look, there we go. There we go. See him trying to chalk up all of our achievement to Africa. No, the hell, jazz don't got, no blues in Africa. Jazz was forged over here on American soil by real FBA brothers and sisters. This is why they got no music like it, coming from the continent. You know what I mean? And, even rap, R&B, all of that was made over here on American soil. I ain't chalking up my achievements to, some global melting pot of, we just all Africans, so Africans, get to ride our wave of success. Damn that. And this is what these Pan-Africans want us to do, family. I told you, listen to their talking points and they'll reveal themselves. See, he's trying to attribute, jazz to, Africa, and that's a bunch of nonsense. We can't let him get away with that. We won't.
But the jazz itself is absolutely an American continuum, on the American continuum, on the American aesthetic continuum in terms of culture. You get gospel music in America.
A lot of our damn near all of our music genres, family, was forged. It got resistance, embedded in our musical art forms. You know what I mean? Because we forged everything through injustice, oppression. Being locked out of equal treatment, and opportunity. So, that's how we got this so much of a resilient spirit as foundational Black Americans, to where other folks, they just cowardly and afraid of white supremacy. They don't know how to face it, to where though we FBAs, we have civil rights movements and, global movements that people want to piggyback off of globally. You even see, whenever somebody, tried to get some movement going on, even in other countries, they try to use our civil rights movement as foundational Black Americans for the blueprint, because we got that, they know it in all actuality. We the only people that got that spirit of resistance.
You don't get gospel music in Africa. What you get now is Christian music in Africa that white Christians have taken. But gospel music is a cultural regenerative.
Gospel music and things, that's how you can feel it in your soul. Nobody on the planet got, music you can feel deep down in your soul. This is why when you listen to a Tupac, family, you can hear his conviction, the things he was going through at the time, and you can say to yourself like, damn, I relate to this music, because we foundational Black Americans, we bring a certain soul, and it's just we give it our all. When we speak, it's from the pit of our stomach, the gut. We put our heart, feeling, and soul into the music. This is why they call us soul people. People of the soul, because we bring that soul element and aspect of things, and other people can't pull on the soul and pour out their whole soul over a record and get that to you. You know what I mean?
Act that happened in the Americas that has certainly found its way back to Africa. Even traditions like jumping the broom. When we as enslaved people wanted to get married, we created that ritual here. African people created that ritual as a part of African culture, as a means of creating a ritualized way whereby...
When you're trying to chalk everything up to Africa, you can tell you're Pan-Africanist, you know what I mean? He giving them softball questions, trying to coddle and pamper them. They needed a real FBA brother and sister on there to debunk that horse crap.
We could signify the validity of our own marriages and relationships. But that is particularly an African-American cultural phenomenon, right? And so what I'm saying...
This is why I ain't even with, that African-American term, that got to be buried, you know what I mean? And people that constantly use that term, African-American family, we got to question them, because that should be buried, and we have buried it for the most part as foundational Black Americans. We, got delineation talk in the public lexicon, and we, named ourselves foundational Black Americans, because that term African American, is so generic and vague, to where though everybody, can be a part of it. Lineage is supposed to be divisive. Everybody ain't supposed to be a part of everybody's lineage, and lineage must be respected. Like, I'm not no Jamaican. I can't go saying I'm a Jamaican or Puerto Rican, because that ain't my lineage. But I can say I'm a foundational Black American, and with that African American term, it's just vague to where though everybody could come over and piggyback off of our achievements and success, and it erases our unique ethnic group as foundational Black Americans that we forged over here on American soil.
Simply saying is I understood the premise of what you were saying, Mr. Frank, right? What most people misunderstand, though, is that we brought a culture with us and we modified and transmuted it.
I'd say we brought nothing with us. Everything we forged over here was, created on American soil through resistance, oppression, injustice, and everything we had to deal with, on, what we had to deal with over here. And not to mention that, many foundational Black American brothers and sisters were already here on this land. We were the Black Aboriginals as well. That's the one thing that, the majority of these Pan-Africanism cats want to negate that. You know what I mean? These scam African cats always want to, just glaze over that or not speak truth to power on that. They never want to say that there was black aboriginals on this land already. You know what I mean? And we were all, mixed and, thrown into slavery, and called Negro, and we had an ethnogenesis. They always want to negate that fact. You know what I mean? Nobody else is required to be some generic Africans, but they want to make us foundational Black Americans generic Africans. Everybody else can have their own lineage, and damn that.
Once we arrived in this place called America.
Thank you.
What might you say to that, sir?
They said thank you.
See, that's like they say all of that, I'm not going to let the whole video play. I'll let a little bit more of it play. But basically, this cat, he's not going to change his mindset or ideology. He's a damn tether. You can't reason with no damn tether. The only thing they know is fleeing. You know what I mean? I don't even see, why even have a conversation with this damn tether? You know what I mean? We just going to keep on putting out the real for real regarding our FBA lineage into the public lexicon. You know what I mean? He's the dude that comes from, a cultureless society, to where though they bow down and need the racism, white supremacy, and throw on their flip-flops and run around the planet when the going gets tough.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
And,
Yes.
and let me just clear this up, because, if you felt an ambush coming. I feel like if people have airwaves, we are in a space right now where there's so much division, particularly there are these culture wars going on right now between blacks and Caribbeans. And that's on purpose, because divided we are conquered. That's how we got.
See, divided we are conquered. These are scam Africanism talking points. You know what I mean? We ain't never had nothing together to begin with. You know what I mean? And us representing our lineage is stronger that way, because just calling ourselves, vague generic Africans and being, Pan-African, that's the way to people to undermine us, come over here, and say we don't deserve no reparations. We getting a lot of things done, family. I'm telling you, all of the headway we're making, just representing the lineage, it's powerful. This is the trump card we done pulled out of our back pocket, to where though people never expected us to do this, we're really shaking things up and causing everyone to go back to the drawing board. You know what I mean? It ain't no sense of having, it sounds good, global black unity, but in the real world, that don't work, and it hasn't worked. You know what I mean? And, it ain't no sense of having, unity with all of these people, that fled their homelands and are so cutthroat, conniving, running scams left and right on each other in their homeland. They'll stop and, stagnate, positive progress we trying to bring in the FBA society.
Conquer. You just told us the story of the whole area known as what was first, the French West Africa, and it was divvied up, but all of Africa has been divvied up. And you said you hate these people because they sold these people, but we're all one people. And if we don't,
yeah, family, I'm gonna just end that. I can't stand, no more of the softball questions, because this platform, the Karen Hunter show, she ain't nothing but a scam African herself, along with that damn black, in my booking opinion. A bunch of softball questions, just to ask this damn Tether, did he change his mind at the end of the video? And he said, nah, he's standing on what he says. And like I said, you can't convince a, fleeing Tether, of anything. You know what I mean? The only thing you can convince them of is white supremacy is their God, because a lot of them take a knee to white supremacy and want to fit in with the system of racism, white supremacy. You know what I mean? So yeah, damn that. I ain't got nothing to prove, nor do I want advice from a foreign fleeing Tether. What they gonna give me advice on? How to flee? I just wanted to, tap in with the family real quick. I'm gonna get off of here, and get on my little Saturday, maybe get a workout in at the gym. And I want to thank everybody for tapping in with me and rocking with me. Thanks to the chat, and everyone have a good weekend. Stay safe out there and be a